Hughes history. Polypop, give your politics a good licking. Hey guys, welcome to George Washington, the OG special in about 5 minutes. What do you think you know about George that you think you might know that you're wrong? First of all, George Washington didn't have wooden teeth. No, he didn't. George Washington, right, had teeth made of ivory. Only the richest of ivory. And maybe a cow tooth somewhere in there as well. The idea of him having white hair, way off base. He was a redhead. Did you know George was a redhead? He put powder in his hair because he thought he looked OG. Because he is George Washington. So, other things about George in terms of biographical information. Well, he came from one of the upper-class families in Virginia, tied back to England and kind of landowners. When he became president, he had 100 slaves. His family made their money off slavery and tobacco. He used to exchange tobacco for expensive goods. He was in the billiards pool. He would play cards and backgammon. He liked cockfighting. Nevertheless, George Washington made his mark really as a land surveyor with the Fairfax family, a very powerful family that traded slaves and rum through the Barbados area into America, and it was his hookup. His brothers died. He inherited his brother's inheritance. His father had died when he was 11, and before you know it, he was like 27, and he was like, gee, because he was George and such. But he owned lots of land, and he ended up taking a job as a land surveyor, seeking out even more land into like Ohio and West Virginia later area, and yada, yada, yada. And that's why the British picked George to be kind of one of the lead, I don't want to say instigators, but the lead role commanders in the colonial army when it came to the French and Indian War, backing up the British as the British were protecting their land rights as they moved westward from the French. You don't like the French, do you like the French and the Indians? But nevertheless, George Washington made his mark in there, and then bada boom, bada bing, next thing you know, he's in charge of the Continental Army. And of course, we all know the story of the Delaware and crossing, and that's nonsense. He kind of had a win-loss record that probably wasn't that great. But nevertheless, he was very disciplined. He didn't like to talk a lot, though. A lot of people don't know that. George had all, that teeth. You stick ivory in your mouth, it hurts. He was actually on a drug, I forget the name of the drug, an opium derivative. That's right, he was on drugs, he was OG. Nevertheless, he wins the Revolutionary War using kind of some strategic methods of kind of punching the British and popping them and coming back out. When the war was over in 1783, the British still had like 50,000 troops in New York City. But G takes credit for the win, put a W in G's column. And most people think that he was president in 1776. No, they would be wrong. He's not president until the failure of the Articles of Confederation, and then George goes on to lead the Constitutional Convention. Now, at the Constitutional Convention, he becomes the one and the only man ever to sweep the Electoral College because everybody voted for him. And John Adams came in second. I don't understand how he came in second if everybody voted for George. Nevertheless, George Washington becomes president and takes the oath in, I think, 1789. All right, what else about G do you need to know? It's in a sack. I'm going to go grab the sack of G. What do you know about G? On tests, if you're in college and you're in high school, you want to know what they want to know? It's not that he was sterile. Smallpox, trip to Barbados, can't talk about it. It is the idea of his strength as President of the United States. I call him the Schwarzenegger. Nevertheless, the idea is he is the first president really to kind of use the army in a military way in a domestic insurrection called the Whiskey Rebellion. And in the Whiskey Rebellion, George crushes the little rebellious Pennsylvania people that won't pay their taxes and really sets down the idea that the federal government is in charge of this government. Who's your daddy? G, oh G. What else do you need to know? National debt. Oh, the debt. Everyone talk about the debt. Talk about the debt. He started the debt. Alexander Hamilton, as Secretary of Treasury, pushed the National Bank and the idea of the federal government assuming debt so they would unite the states under this umbrella of kind of economic power. How do you like that? Now, there's some other stuff you should know about George. Number one, he wasn't in a political party, although he kind of was. He was a Federalist, but he never really officially signed up as a Federalist, but he did back a stronger central government. What else about G do you have to know? There's something called the farewell address. Let's see if we can do it in 30 seconds. What did George Washington say in his farewell address that you need to know? Well, number one, he got it right when he said, fear the two-party system. He was really afraid. I don't know why I have an Italian accent. He was afraid of the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans, Jefferson's party, and Hamilton and the Federalists going in two different directions and ripping the country in a partisan bickering fight that would cause gridlock and the nation to stop at a standstill. Sound familiar? He also warned us against European expeditions, from staying away from Europe and wars on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. He really is an isolationist. George Washington, the Federalist strong president on the dollar bill, is an isolationist. Retreat and defeat. But yeah, and it kept us safe for a long time. And last, he stepped down after his second term. No more than 2 terms for George. And he sets unwritten constitution with these principles. No president up to FDR would serve more than 2 terms. And then we amend the baby. Now it's a rule. He forms the first cabinet. He really sets tradition and precedent, and that's why George is OG. George Washington died 3 years after serving his second term in 1799 because he wouldn't take his wet clothes off after fixing up the horses. And then he got a really bad sore throat, and the next thing you know, the doctors are bloodletting him, and oh my God, he died. Washington Monument, he's the only president to have the Capitol in New York City. That's right, that's OG. So we think that's enough for you today. You should know a little bit more about George than when you started. All right, let's see who we can drag out of the closet for the next episode. Dead Americans, here we go. Polly Pop, giving politics a good licking.